Noam Chomsky, a name that resonates across various fields of study and activism. You know the name, right? If you've ever delved into linguistics, philosophy, or political activism, you've likely encountered his work. He's kind of a big deal. Linguist, philosopher, political activist, this guy does it all. Chomsky's contributions to the field of linguistics alone have revolutionized how we understand language and its structure. He's written over 100 books and he's not afraid to speak his mind, especially when it comes to American foreign policy. His bibliography spans a wide range of topics, from the intricacies of syntax to the complexities of global politics. Chomsky's been called the father of modern linguistics, but he's also a rock star in the world of political thought. His theories on generative grammar have laid the groundwork for much of contemporary linguistic theory. He's been a vocal critic of U.S. foreign policy for decades, and his work has influenced generations of activists and thinkers. From the Vietnam War to the War on Terror, Chomsky has never shied away from critiquing the actions of the U.S. government. In Hegemony or Survival, Chomsky takes a hard look at America's role in the world. He argues that the U.S. pursues policies that are often detrimental to global stability and peace. He doesn't pull any punches, folks. His critiques are sharp, well-researched, and often controversial, challenging the mainstream narratives that dominate the media. Get ready for some hard truths about the good old U.S. of A. Chomsky's work encourages us to question the status quo and to think critically about the information we consume. His influence extends beyond academia and into the streets, where activists and ordinary citizens alike draw inspiration from his words. Whether you agree with him or not, there's no denying the impact of his work. In classrooms around the world, Chomsky's theories are taught and debated, sparking intellectual curiosity and critical thinking. His work has become a staple in the curriculum of many disciplines. Over the years, Chomsky has received numerous awards and honors, recognizing his contributions to both linguistics and social thought. His legacy is one of relentless inquiry and a commitment to truth. So the next time you pick up a book by Noam Chomsky, remember that you're engaging with the ideas of one of the most influential thinkers of our time. His work challenges us to look beyond the surface and to question the deeper structures of power and knowledge. Dive into his writings, explore his theories, and let your mind be expanded by the profound insights of the big thinker. So what's this book all about? In a nutshell, Hegemony or Survival is a warning siren. Chomsky argues that America's pursuit of global dominance is pushing us towards disaster. He lays out what he sees as the biggest threats to human survival. Think nuclear war, climate change, the works. And guess what? He says America's got to own up to its part in making these problems worse. Chomsky's not saying America is the root of all evil, but he is saying that our actions have consequences. And if we don't change our ways, we're headed for a world of hurt. Chomsky says, America talks a big game about democracy and freedom. The rhetoric is always about promoting liberty, human rights, and the rule of law. Politicians and leaders often speak about the United States as a beacon of hope and a model for other nations to follow. They emphasize the importance of democratic values and the need to protect them at all costs. But he thinks our actions tell a different story. Chomsky argues that there is a stark contrast between what is said and what is done. He points out that while the U.S. government speaks about democracy, its foreign policy often undermines these very principles. The actions taken on the global stage frequently contradict the noble ideals professed in speeches and official statements. He argues that the U.S. often throws its weight around to get what it wants, even if it means supporting dictators or overthrowing democratically elected leaders. Chomsky highlights numerous instances where the U.S. has intervened in the affairs of other nations, not to promote democracy, but to secure its own interests. These interventions have often led to the installation of authoritarian regimes that are more aligned with U.S. strategic and economic goals. He points to examples like the Vietnam War and the U.S. invasion of Iraq. In both cases, the justification given was to protect freedom and democracy. However, the outcomes were devastating for the local populations and did little to advance democratic governance. Instead, these conflicts resulted in significant loss of life, widespread destruction, and long-term instability in the regions affected. Chomsky says these actions weren't about spreading democracy, they were about maintaining American power. He believes that the true motive behind these interventions is to ensure that the U.S. remains the dominant global power. By controlling key regions and resources, the US can exert influence over other nations and maintain its strategic advantage. He argues that the US uses fear and propaganda to control its own citizens and justify its actions abroad. The media plays a crucial role in shaping public perception and creating a narrative that supports government policies. By emphasizing threats and dangers, the government can rally public support for military interventions and other actions that might otherwise be unpopular. It's a pretty bleak picture, but Chomsky wants us to wake up and see what's really going on. He encourages people to question the official narratives and seek out alternative sources of information. By becoming more informed and engaged, citizens can challenge the status quo and push for a more just and democratic society. Chomsky's message is ultimately one of empowerment, urging individuals to take an active role in shaping the future. Section 4, History Lesson: Chomsky's Greatest Hits. Chomsky backs up his arguments with a whole lot of history. He dives deep into events like the Cold War, the Vietnam War, and the US involvement in Latin America. He doesn't just tell the stories though, he connects the dots. He shows how these events reveal a pattern of US behavior that prioritizes power over peace and justice. Chomsky wants us to learn from the past. He thinks that if we understand how we got here, we might have a chance to change course. Section 5, Hegemony, America's favorite word, even if they don't say it. Hegemony. It's a fancy word, but it's important to understand if you want to get Chomsky. Basically, it means being the top dog. Chomsky argues that the US is obsessed with maintaining its hegemony, its position as the world's only superpower. He says this obsession drives our foreign policy and leads us to interfere in the affairs of other countries. He argues that this quest for hegemony is a dangerous game. It creates enemies, fuels instability, and makes the world a much more dangerous place. Section 6. The Price of Power. America's Impact on the World. The United States, often seen as a beacon of democracy and freedom, has a profound influence on global affairs. Its policies and actions reverberate across continents, affecting millions of lives in ways both seen and unseen. From military interventions to economic sanctions, America's reach is vast and its impact significant. Noam Chomsky, a renowned linguist and political activist, doesn't just criticize America for the sake of it. His critiques are rooted in a deep concern for humanity and a desire for a more equitable world. Chomsky's work spans decades, during which he has meticulously documented the consequences of American foreign policy. He's deeply concerned about the impact of our actions on people around the world. Whether it's the displacement of millions due to wars, or the economic hardships imposed by sanctions, Chomsky highlights the often overlooked human cost. These are not just abstract numbers or distant tragedies, they are real people with real lives disrupted by decisions made far away. He talks about the human cost of war and violence. The images of war-torn cities and injured civilians are stark reminders of the devastation that follows military interventions. Chomsky argues that these actions are often justified under the guise of promoting democracy or protecting national interests. But the reality on the ground tells a different story. He highlights the devastating effects of US sanctions. These economic measures, intended to pressure governments, often end up hurting the most vulnerable populations. Empty shelves, long lines for basic necessities, and widespread economic hardship are common sights in sanctioned countries. Chomsky points out that these policies can lead to severe humanitarian crises, exacerbating poverty and suffering. He shows how America's pursuit of self-interest often comes at the expense of the poor and marginalized. Domestically, the focus on military spending and international dominance can divert resources away from addressing pressing social issues. Homelessness, poverty, and inequality are persistent problems that are often overshadowed by the country's global ambitions. Chomsky wants us to recognize our responsibility to others. He believes that with great power comes great responsibility, and that America has a moral obligation to use its influence for the greater good. This means not only refraining from harmful actions, but also actively working to support and uplift those in need. The efforts of volunteers and aid workers around the world are examples of how we can make a positive difference. He believes that a more just and peaceful world is possible, but only if America starts acting like a responsible global citizen. This involves embracing diplomacy, supporting international cooperation, and prioritizing human rights. By doing so, the United States can help build a world where peace and justice prevail, and where every individual has the opportunity to thrive. The vision of a united global community, working together for the common good, is not just a dream, but a tangible goal that we can strive towards.